Sean, I think you can mute everybody and we'll get started. It's just a minute or two after 2 o'clock. So thanks everyone for being here, and let's get going.
Have you ever considered how much your world depends on petroleum-based products?
Well, in that video clip, at least the person wasn't wearing petroleum-based underwear. Kind of a whew. Anyway, hello everyone, and welcome to the start of our fall program. Whether you have been following this climate crisis series all last year, or whether this is your first session, we've had a number of new people sign up. Given the unusual opening video, I should clarify that this session is on systemic issues, specifically consumerism. But first, I wanted to quickly review where we are in this series. It's been a whole summer. I don't know about you, I can't remember last week, let alone where we left off. So I wanted to provide a quick overview. Now, we don't normally start with sessions, our sessions with a quirky video, but we wanted to use it as a signal that we are shifting emphasis now. During our first year, the emphasis was more informational and using widely, highly respected experts in various aspects of the climate crisis, although it also did contain many actions and, of course, was grounded in God's good spirit. While both these aspects will continue, that is, well, actually the three aspects, the experts, actions, and God's good spirit, the emphasis will be shifting from simply information to more of assisting all of us to actually bring about the needed changes, personally and on a systemic level, to reduce the worst of the climate crisis projections. Since this series was first conceived, we are now 20% of the way to 2030. So we want to expedite the numerous positive actions that can be taken. Now, the Washington Post recently indicated over this past summer, 1 in 3 Americans were directly affected by climate change. If you think about that, California and up the coast, well, that's a lot of people. New York was flooded. That's a lot of people. And then all the way down to Louisiana. So this is an issue that is becoming more and more clear to people. As well, Greenland, for the first time ever, its top peaks, which are normally way below zero, actually it rained on them. As well, the IPCC, that international body of climate science experts, came out with a report that said their former estimates of 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees Celsius were more unlikely. And then even 2 days ago, the UN report reported that with the Paris Agreement, all the countries were supposed to make targets, which they did. The report was that nobody, virtually nobody, is coming even remotely close to those targets. They're all increasing. We haven't even started to decrease our emissions, with the exception of a bit during the pandemic. So that's sort of why the shift. This isn't simply an interesting topic to be informed of. This is life at stake. Now, we want to avoid two things. One is being overwhelmed. Two is guilt. And that's where the Spirit of God comes into play. We must be grounded in that good spirit that coaxes all to life. That is our essential key. That's what keeps a little bit of guilt can be okay, but nothing more. If it's anything more, I have lost my anchoring in God's sense of goodness and that sense of life. And I've got to re-anchor. And that's why we come together. And that's why I am so thrilled that all of you have taken this time and hopefully, and have continually, and have done some of you've done some marvelous things. And hopefully all together, we can more align our lives with that spirit. It's interesting. They say one of the ways you tell whether a society is in an emergency or crisis, there are various factors, indicators, and we're going to get into that in another session. But one of them is whether the people are telling the truth. And that's why I wanted to start off with some of these things. We have to tell the truth. But beyond that, we have to be grounded in that good spirit so that we remain hopeful. We remain a joyful people. We remain a forward-moving people in that sense of God's good spirit. So again, welcome. I am so glad you're part of this. And together, all of us here can join together God's good spirit that is around the globe, bringing people to that awareness and hopefully to those patterns that will align more clearly with life. So that's a bit of that arcing overview that, again, hopefully does move towards justice. It is climate justice that we are hoping to move towards. Each one of us upholding the notion of diversity, each one of us has a next step to take. But it'll be different for each one of us if we truly believe in diversity. So we have to support each other. We can't tell each other. For sure, we can share where we are. We must share where we are, where our next step is. And that's part of what we're going to be doing over the next while. But we must also uphold that diversity, that what my next step is may not be yours, and support you as I hope you will support me. That's part of this whole series and the arc of it, that notion of diversity and supporting each other and recognizing we are all in different places. And hopefully we can all recognize that next step and be willing to take it. Life is depending on it. Okay, so on to the precise topic then of consumerism. Let me share again my screen. And so the topic is consumerism. This is where we normally start. Those of you who've been here, we always start with the vision, the sustainable flourishing of all life. That, in essence, is what God's good spirit is trying to move us towards, is trying to get our lives aligned to. Today, we will have a panel. Most of them have been pre-recorded. You'll see that in a minute. We're changing things a little. There will just be one discussion group, and it will be generally a week later, as you can see, Sunday, September 26th. Now, in that, we will, like usual, delve deeper, grapple more, explore, share. We must maintain that sense of life and vitality as we grapple with these things. So hopefully you'll be able to catch those. If not, again, all of these will be archived on the website and you can watch them later. But one of the other things we'll be discussing in starting next week, we're not sure if or when it's going to happen, is a brand new notion, which is, do we want to create a supportive network that is separate from these sessions? These will keep going, but a network that can simply support each other. Is that something that would be valuable for you? We are, a people that comes together and shares and supports each other. So give that some thought, and we will start. We may not make any final decisions, but that's one of the things. This is a long-term process, and that may be something that will be helpful. It'll be an informal network, and I'm definitely open to ideas of how best to proceed, or whether even you want to. So keep that in mind for next week. The final thing I want to say before moving on is in some of the videos you'll be watching, it's going to say this person's video or this person's video is already up on the website. In fact, no, the internet was too slow and I couldn't get them up in time, but they will all be simply like this session and all sessions. These other videos will be up on the website, probably within the next 3 days. Okay, so with that, we will turn to our first video. Now, this is called The Story of Stuff, and it's a fairly well-known one. It's been watched by millions of people, but it allows us all to basically be on what you kind of call be on the same page in terms of this notion of consumerism and sort of the behind the scenes implications to it, so that we all sort of have a common grounding in that. So if you can, there it is. We will watch that now.
Do you have one of these? I got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource space has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing: toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit, because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing, and I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. And maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4.99 wouldn't even pay the rent for the shelf space it occupied until I came along, let alone part of the staff guy's salary who helped me pick it out, or the multiple ocean cruises and truck rides pieces of this radio went on. That's how I realized I didn't pay for the radio. So who did pay? Well, these people paid with the loss of their natural resource space. These people paid with the loss of their clean air, with increasing asthma and cancer rates. Kids in the Congo paid with their future. 30% of the kids in part of the Congo have dropped out of school to mine coltan, a metal we need for our cheap and disposable electronics. These people even paid by having to cover their own health insurance. All along this system, people pitched in so I could get this radio for $4.99. And none of these contributions are recorded in any accounts book. That's what I mean by the company owners externalized the true costs of production. And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers. The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average US person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically? Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one. It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing. Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that era as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the US is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision. So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted, so we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck, so you gotta go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you gotta go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought, so you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again, and we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all this stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate. Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse, it makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, 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 we should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough, for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs, where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together, you can never separate those for true recycling. So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness, it's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming, blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government, so that it really is by the people, for the people. All of this work is critically important. But things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system into something new, a system that doesn't waste resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things like green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies. It's already started. Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming. Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it, and we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around, get involved.
Okay, a few things dated in that, but hopefully you got the general picture. Joan will now start the panel.
So thank you everyone for your attention during that video. We know it's long, we know it's overwhelming, we know there's a lot of concepts thrown in there, but we wanted to start with that because it presents the whole picture, as she said, and it does it in a bit of an entertaining way. Next, we wanted to find out stories of what people are doing. What are people experimenting with, and how is it going? So we've asked several people to participate in that. I'm going to start off with a story about I'm the grandma. When she's talked about ask your grandma what it was like, I'm one of the grandmas. So I'm going to start off with a story about what it was like. But then there will be 3 additional people who have recorded what they want to share with you about real things that they've done in their lives and what they've learned from it. So there's a couple of things that I found out as I've been doing a lot of online research about consumerism. The first, and this has been briefly touched on, is there are so many people who will say it doesn't matter what we buy and consume. Each of us, our choices are only a drop in the bucket. And so the real potential is through legislation and social activism. And that's very true. That is where the real long-term potential is. However, it's not going to be fast. So here's the thing. If you read and are aware of what different governments are proposing at the moment with moving towards more green energy, with moving towards electric cars, those are all great plans, but they're going to take 10 to 15 years to get up and running and actually start reducing carbon emissions. In the meantime, they will actually increase our carbon emissions. This at a time when we're already experiencing more and more climate emergencies. And so, to put it quite bluntly, we're out of time for long-range changes to be the only solution, and we simply cannot continue to maintain our current lifestyle. That's a pretty sobering statement. But our current lifestyles, for most of us, for the average North American, are simply unsustainable. We're on the precipice of cascading catastrophes unless we start reducing emissions now. And so we want to hold up consumerism as vitally important, this whole topic about how we can consume less. Yes, it's individual action, but it only takes examples like the recent global attention that Greta Thunberg got from starting an individual action and talking about it, talking to everyone about it. So then the next thing I found in my online research was that, again, there's a lot of confusion about what is the way to tackle consumerism, what works, what doesn't work. But one of the ideas that was held up was to go back to a 1960s style of consumerism. So for any of you who are my age or older, you can remember it. It was the decade when consumerism began accelerating rapidly, and so the beginning of the 60s was far different from the end of it. But even in the early 60s, we had what we needed and we had a good lifestyle. As I look back on it, I see some key differences from today. Quality over quantity, no disposables, more local sourcing, far less following trends. What we bought was durable and repairable. For instance, my parents bought a sofa when they were married in 1949. By the mid-60s, the fabric was pretty worn, so it was sent out to be recovered. And then it was recovered a second time 20 years after that. They got 50 years of use from a single couch because the furniture itself was built to last and because furniture repair services were easily available and because they weren't following trends. By the turn of the century, however, most furniture is now designed to last only 7 years, using lower quality materials because the data shows that most people want new furniture every 7 years as styles change. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to get 50 years out of every piece of furniture, although that's not a bad strategy, but rather we can choose the most durable and repairable options in all of our buying choices. We had less, but we had enough. It's not possible to overemphasize the impact of that mindset. There were no walk-in closets because we had fewer outfits. We washed our clothes and our bodies less frequently with way fewer products, but we didn't smell bad and we weren't dirty. Families shared a single vehicle and a single television, and so negotiated how to meet everyone's needs. We spent less, but we had a lot more time to socialize and talk with each other and nourish our relationships. Right from the beginning of our webinars a year ago, we've emphasized that the root cause of climate change is a spiritual issue, a spiritual disconnect, and that real lasting change needs spiritual solutions. We spent some time developing our spiritual connections to all of creation. Taking a hard look at our consumerism lifestyle has helped me to see that the spiritual path called for here is one of moving towards a lifestyle of simplicity. I'm not suggesting a lifestyle of sacrifice or deprivation, but a lifestyle of sufficiency. It reminds me of how this church used to talk about the difference between our needs and just wants as opposed to non-essential desires. Some of the concepts I've mentioned here can, I believe, help us with that transition. Quality over quantity, avoid disposables, more local sources, and less following trends. I hope you enjoy the next 3 stories that will be shared with you.
The next one is the next three are all pre-recorded. The first one is from Brianne Meath in Alaska, talking primarily about recycling.
Hi, I'm Brianne Meath from the Fairbanks, Alaska congregation, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk a little bit about the subject of sustainability within the lens of the climate emergency. In the last 5 years, I've spent time working for the Office of Sustainability at our local college campus and learned a lot about the intricacies of reducing, reusing, and recycling. It was very eye-opening to be the person actually picking up the full recycling bags, sifting through and sorting and delivering to our local recycling center. As recycling has become more mainstream, people are sometimes taking advantage of the system, usually without knowing it. For example, in Fairbanks, we're only able to recycle aluminum cans, paper, and plastic containers with the number 1 or 2 that get narrower at the top, like a plastic soda bottle. Something like a salad container is not recyclable here. My town is accessible by road system, but many others in Alaska are not, making recycling much more difficult to collect and process. It's not impossible, but it is difficult and expensive. We also don't have a processing facility for our recycled goods in Alaska, so everything we collect must be shipped out to be turned into something usable in the future. The materials collected sometimes change depending on the recycling market at the time. Regardless of the presentations that we would do on campus or the labels we would attach to the recycling bins, there would be tons of trash and food waste to sift out of the bag before we could deliver it to the recycling center. When recycling bins are being treated essentially like another garbage bin, it's very difficult to obtain a usable material to upcycle. This is why it's imperative that we direct more energy toward the reducing and reusing to decrease the amount of waste in general, whether it be recyclable or not. It's not enough to just guess at what's recyclable in your community and hope for the best. This mindset just creates a pileup of unusable materials and gives people a false sense of accomplishment. It's actually better to send something to the garbage can if you aren't entirely sure that you're recycling it in the correct place so that it doesn't clog the recycling stream down the line. It's become trendy to care about the environment, which has positive and negative aspects. On one hand, it's great to increase awareness about the impact humans are having on our planet and what we can do about it. But on the other hand, it's led to the spread of a concept called greenwashing. This is when a claim is made that a product is environmentally friendly when it's really not. An example of this might be H&M's Take Back Clothes program. They accept clothing donations, which they say they will either sell to a secondhand store or upcycle into a product like textile insulation. And they offer a coupon to go towards a future purchase in exchange for your donation. This seems like a nice idea at first, but H&M is a prime example of fast fashion. They perpetuate the business model that clothes are cheap to buy and are not meant to last. It's ironic that they're claiming to do their part for the environment, while at the same time thrive as a top contributor to one of the most wasteful industries. Another example of a greenwashed product is compostable garbage bags. If you're using these for your green waste that's going to an industrial composting facility, that works. But many people buy these thinking they'll decompose in a landfill, which is not the case. There are too many non-organic items for this bag to break down in a landfill, even if it's made with a plant-based material. So if you want to be more eco-friendly with your garbage bag choice, reuse your dog food bag, or make the plastic that your Costco-sized toilet paper comes in into a bag. Or if your trash is dry, skip the bag altogether. But don't just assume because something is plant-based or allegedly compostable that it's really good for our earth. It's important to have a healthy skepticism when a product is being marketed as eco-conscious. It's natural to want to believe the advertising claims, but I urge you to pause and thoughtfully consider the behind the scenes at play. Another thing that's become popularized is thrifting. Not long ago, there was a lot of judgment surrounding thrifted items. If you shop secondhand, you were poor, weren't up to date on styles, etc. Now we have a huge number of people who are making a living on finding quality items in secondhand stores, marking them up, and reselling on a different platform. This has led to a decrease in accessibility for those who do need the cheaper prices secondhand stores offer, as the nicer items are wiped out of the stores. Prices have also increased across the board at thrift stores as their shopper demographic has shifted. The problem does not lie in buying items from a secondhand store. The issue is making a profit off of said items when someone else relies on that discounted price. As we examine our lives and identify ways to lessen our environmental impact, it's important to think critically. As you're going through items in your home to drop at a donation site, ask yourself, would someone find value in this? If it's a shirt with a rip and multiple stains, don't send that to the secondhand store. Use it as a rag for as long as you choose, and then it's garbage. When putting together a bag to drop at a local shelter, be mindful that the items are clean and usable. It's not helpful to overwhelm thrift stores or recycling centers with items you are wishfully donating. We don't live in a circular economy, so it's inevitable that we make trash. The goal is simply to make less of it. Some people make the argument that our individual choices can't add up to make that much of a difference, and that the real problem lies within large companies and corporations. There is truth to this. However, we as the consumers support these giant companies to continue their wasteful manufacturing practices. We can simultaneously make changes in our day-to-day life to minimize our landfill contributions while also demanding accountability and business practice changes. We don't have to choose one or the other. I challenge you to expand your definition of what it means to be eco-conscious. Think beyond the single-use plastic so that we can address the climate emergency on a more comprehensive level instead of treating it with Band-Aid solutions. We can shape our world to see trash differently. Can this item be repaired? What can be repurposed? What can be replaced with a more sustainable option? Do I really need to buy this item at all? By working together, learning from Indigenous people who were the original land caretakers, thinking critically, and looking at the gray areas of sustainability, not just the black and white, we can make progress. Thank you.
Okay, we have two more to go. Just a note, if you have questions, put them in the chat. All of these are simply to stimulate thoughts, creative ideas, saying, well, I could try that, or no, that's not for me. That's coming together in dialogue. Next one then is Christy Score-Smith. Their family consciously decided to try going off-grid for a year.
Hi, my name's Christy Score-Smith, and I wanted to talk to you today about an experience that my family and I had a few years ago. We decided we wanted to try an experiment in low carbon and small carbon footprint living. And so we have some property, it's behind me here, on Herstein Island. It's 4.5 acres, and we decided we wanted to try to see how lightly we could live and how low cost and how carbon light we could live. And so we decided to take a year and come out here and live on our property. One of the reasons that we decided to do this was because there's a lot of single people doing it, but we wanted to try to do it with our 3 children. At the time, our twins were 5. Oh, sorry, our oldest was 5 and our twins were 3. So they were young kids. And we wanted to see what a family of 5 could do living off the land for a year. So the recent report from the IPCC, this is September 2021, came out, and it said that in order for our world to be sustainable, we need to have each person have a carbon footprint of about 1.5 tons per year. The average American does quite a bit more than that, about 16 tons. And so we wanted to see what it would like to live in a small carbon, tiny house in the woods, off-grid for a year. And so come with me and I will show you what we did. So here I am at our garden. We did grow a lot of our own food when we lived here, and it was a really great experience. We really enjoyed doing that. Behind me there, right there, is the aviary where we had a lot of quail. We had 10 quail that we harvested the eggs from, and we enjoyed that experience so much. We took them back with us to the city when we moved to the condo and had them on our balcony there, and it was a really nice way, even in the city where you have a small space, to have some fresh eggs and some ways to sort of provide for your own food. We also had some container garden plants where we had herbs and tomatoes and things like that, even at the condo. But here out on the property, we had quite a big garden, as you can see, and it was a wonderful way to cut back on our food costs, but also, again, get really in touch with nature and provide for ourselves. You can see here some rain barrels, so we collected all of our rainwater to feed the garden. As far as water for ourselves, we used a well. Our neighbors had a well, and so we were able to use the water from the well, and it was really wonderful and clean and good drinking water. So again, it was all off-grid and self-sustaining. One thing we realized is that you can live a very good lifestyle. Just giving you a shot, more of the shot of the garden there. With low carbon impact if you have a lot of access to resources, because we did need to have a well, solar panels, and a garden. Without those things, it would be a little tough. We also realized that it takes a lot of physical energy and physical labor to do that, and so we were young when we did it, and that was very, very successful. It might be harder for people that are older or have pre-existing health conditions, but for a young family of 5, it worked out great. Okay. So as far as entertainment for the kids, we had a little set for them that they were able to play with. We also set up some little houses for them, so they had their own little tiny houses out here, and they played outside a lot. They played in all kinds of weather. We also built a tree house that's a little further down, and they just spent hours and hours outside and enjoying nature and all of those things. So for kids, I think one of the questions we wanted to ask ourselves and have answered was, do kids enjoy living this type of lifestyle? And the answer we found was yes, they love it, and it is sustainable with kids. It's a little bit harder, especially the younger the kids are, but their imagination is really active, and they just love the wide open spaces. We had a rule in our family that once we got to the island, we wouldn't have screen time for the kids, and so when we were off island, we did let them be on screens and stuff for those 2 days, but then when we were here, we did not, and that was a really great decision for us at the time. And when we moved back to this city, we still implemented low screen time for the kids. One of the things that does have a high carbon impact is downloading and streaming videos. And so to reduce that carbon input again for that year, we did want to restrict how much streaming we did. So we have a DVD player, and like I said, we would put a big sheet up in the inside of our house, and we would watch movies from a DVD player. And so it was really cheap to get a bunch of used DVDs at the library or at Goodwill or something like that, and just nobody wants DVDs anymore. So you can get them for pretty cheap, and that's what we did for entertainment, just being outside and playing, and lots of crafts and activities, and then our little DVD player. So the best way to manage transportation is to get an older car that has lots of good miles left in it, and to run it as long as you can. Ideally, it would be an older car that would be electric, and as soon as this gas car dies, we plan to go electric. But in the meantime, it's actually better for the environment to just use your car as long as it possibly can go, because you've already extracted 50% of the total carbon budget for the car just in the manufacturing of that car. So, thank you. So just in closing, we really enjoyed the experience of living a small, sustainable, low carbon lifestyle for a year with our family. It was definitely a great experience, and we really, really value that time. The kids still talk about it. We really incorporated the motto, use it up, wear it out, make do, or do without. that was pretty much how we lived that year, and we've taken that philosophy back to the city. Since then, we have outgrown the condo that was our 2-bedroom condo, and we've recently purchased a house. But we purchased a very small house, and it is a 1-bedroom, small 1,400 square foot house that has a big yard, so we can continue to grow vegetables in the city. And we still have quail, so we still raise our own eggs. We really wanted a small house so that the carbon footprint of the house would be small. When we did the condo, when we lived in the condo, our carbon footprint for the year for each person was 2 tons per year. The average again is about 16 for a US family, but what we need to get to is 1.5. Since moving to the house, our carbon footprint is now 2.8 per person in our family, because that would include the mortgage that we had and the additional space of the house. We still just have 1 car and we don't fly, and so that drastically reduces our carbon footprint along with all the other measures that we take. So I guess my final thought to leave with you is that you can live a low carbon lifestyle. It takes some planning and some preparation, but you don't have to live out in the country. You can take some of the ideas from the country, bring them back into the city, whether you're in a condo or multifamily housing or a home. You can have 1 car, you can eat a low protein diet, or a low animal protein diet, and do lots of walking and all sorts of things. There's a whole bunch of resources online if you're more interested. That's just a little glimpse of kind of what our lifestyle was like when we tried to live below 1.5 tons. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
You're muted, Rod.
There. Sorry, my cursor was just off the mark. The next one actually comes from her husband, and I think long before they were married. I don't know, but I think that's the case. Christian Scoresmith. This is of his time in Ukraine, and the insights he got from a much lower level of consumption and comparative living style.
Hi, my name is Christian Scoresmith, and I've been invited to talk about my experience in what might resemble a post-carbon environment or situation. And that's because I served in Peace Corps in Ukraine from 1999 to 2002, and so I lived roughly at the level of people in that environment. And of course, in Ukraine, at this time, this is like 10 years after the breakup of the Soviet Union. There was the political collapse, the economic collapse. There was corruption, large and small, through every level and strata. After 10 years, they'd only started to recover from the collapse of infrastructure. And one of the so that resembles what some people might imagine or might expect a post-carbon environment to be, where the social, political, economic situation is quite different. Okay. Out of all of these, there was a couple takeaways, right? And for how difficult it was, there was always, I came away from that experience landing on hope, right? Because the reality is that that humans can do really well with a lot less than we in American culture are used to doing with, right? I mean, in Ukraine, I had far less to deal with, far less resources, but it wasn't that bad. You know, I lived a fine life. Everyone around me, I mean, there were some difficult things about it, and it wasn't always comfortable, but we more than got by. We lived rich lives, right? There was times when we'd laugh and we'd have adventures and parties and good times. And I mean, the parties were simpler and there were no costume parties, right? But it was conversation was a true treasure, right? I mean, there was other things that came out of that experience. Like I said, we preserved our own food, and that was a great skill to have. And then also, you know, it's more environmental because you're reusing resources. It's all local, right? And so, like, and also one of the benefits was these overnight trains, right? So there were efficiencies that were built in by necessity because everything is so hard, so difficult. You really learn to deal with or to be able to have only what you need, right? Because it's so difficult to get anything. Make sure that what you get is what you need and cut out all the rest. So the amount of consumption was really reduced. And I think fundamentally, the key insight was that we can live a rich life with a lot less consumption than typically the American lifestyle gives us the impression of. But the reality is that's also easier to do in a community rather than isolated as a person or as a family even. It takes a community to make that happen, but it's not impossible and it's not dystopian, right? For all that disruption and corruption and such, it was a good life. I really enjoyed it. So that was my experience in Ukraine at the turn of the 21st century. And thanks for taking the time to listen to my story.
Okay, before we move into a brief Q&A, Lori has a reflective pause for us.
Actually, Lori and Lori have a reflective pause for us. I would like, as several of our panelists have suggested today, this work requires being grounded in the good spirit, listening deeply, and I really am going to be inviting us to take a look at the practice of gratitude as being the antidote to consumerism. But first, my dear friend Lori Sharp, who's a spiritual director, a lavender farmer, a minister in Community of Christ, and just a really good friend, also created a video for us in response to this question about how to live life, knowing what we're learning.
Hello, I'm Lori Sharp from Vancouver, Washington. Some of my earliest memories come in small snippets of life with my parents, being out in natural settings, such as when I was a toddler, holding my dad's hand as we walked in the snow to a stream behind our country home. We were fetching water because the pipes had frozen in the house. Or the time I was placed in a rotting tree stump for safekeeping while my mom picked blackberries. Decades later, I can still see the walk in the snow, hear the water in the stream, and smell the fragrance of fir needles warmed by sunlight. It's memories such as these that have nourished my passion for trees, rocks, moonlight, walking in the sand beside the Pacific Ocean, listening to birds in the trees, feeling a connection to the beauty that is our planet home. One day, several months ago, while on a walk in a park I frequent, I repeated a routine of mine by standing with a pair of wild cherry trees, touching each and uttering a blessing as I leave. Peace to you, my friends. That day, as I stepped back onto the path home, within my mind's eye, I saw the tree directly behind me bend down and wrap its limbs around me as if in a farewell hug. The connection was powerful and very real. My spirit was moved, and I immediately returned to my friends to express my gratitude. It's awareness such as this that is creating a change of heart within me, challenging my choices. This awareness is convicting me of the carelessness of my past, begging the questions, do I want part of my legacy on this earth to be that of filling a landfill, or to be contributing to unhealthy air and water? Isn't it time to stop living a throwaway lifestyle? Some of the changes I've made seem simple and small, such as driving less, choosing food that has a smaller carbon footprint, as well as purchasing potting soil that uses much less peat moss. But informed choices can serve to widen our perspective and help us to see with new eyes. In response to my widening perspective, I realize that I love better those I speak to by name. My depth of caring about anyone can be enhanced by saying their name, to be willing to have empathy for them. So I speak to trees, rocks, birds on my property and along the paths that I walk. And I'm returning to a left behind habit of speaking to and about this planet as Earth Mother. For in this relationship of caring for and seeking to love better, my love begins with speaking her name.
So I invite you to breathe gratitude for Earth Mother and our love for her and the reason we are drawn to come together to care for her. This breath you breathe is gift. This heartbeat that you feel is gift. This air that we breathe is gift. These difficult awarenesses and this array of possible responses, these are gifts. So breathe your gratefulness, your gracefulness. Breathe your sense of being filled with grace, with gift for this whole interconnected, living, precious earth. And join with me in breathing gratitude for Lori, her reflection, and for each one of our panelists who gave their gifts back with time and energy, sharing their wisdom with us today. Amen. So I have a homework assignment for you all. I want to say a few words about gratitude and why I am coming to be convinced this is what really matters. Gratitude is the antidote to consumerism. Where our consumption-fueled economy sees the world through the lens of scarcity and commodity, gratitude sees the world through the lenses of abundance and gift. You can go ahead and hit the forward, there's animation there. Let me say it again. Gratitude is the antidote to consumerism instead of scarcity and commodity. Gratitude is a lens through which we see only abundance and gift. It is a gateway to a voluntary simplicity, a type of lifestyle that's undertaken joyfully, that is given back to the earth as gift rather than as an unsustainable sense of deprivation. And again, Rod, you can hit there you go. It is a way of looking deeply into the heart of creation, seeing abundance everywhere, seeing connections everywhere, and recognizing everything that comes to us as gift. So I'm not talking about that practice of gratitude that we lazily practice on Sunday mornings when we simply call out the things that make us feel good or the luxuries that make our lives more convenient. We are talking about a practice of gratefulness, as I said, that's full of grace and filled with gift, something that's deeply felt beyond just a mere emotion, something that changes our life and allows us to answer the question, how much do I need? With, I already have so much. So Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Native American botanist, and we're not going to have time to look at the Thanksgiving address, but this is a practice of gratitude from the Onondaga Nation that takes an inventory of the natural world and goes through in detail with long prayers of gratefulness daily, every time people come together to remember that the one thing we all share can be gratefulness for the beauty of this world. And Robin says this in her great, exquisite book, Braiding Sweetgrass. You can't listen to the Thanksgiving address. You can't practice gratitude without feeling wealthy. And while expressing gratitude seems innocent enough, it is a revolutionary idea. In a consumer society, contentment is a radical proposition. Recognizing abundance rather than scarcity undermines an economy that thrives by creating unmet desires. Gratitude cultivates an ethic of fullness, but the economy needs emptiness. So the Thanksgiving address, this practice of gratitude reminds you that you already have everything you need. Gratitude doesn't send you out shopping to find satisfaction. Satisfaction comes as a gift rather than a commodity. And it subverts the foundation of our entire economy. That's good medicine, she says, for land and people alike. So here's your assignment for next week. And you don't need to write this down because Rod's going to send a PDF out with these slides. You're going to go outside if you can, or around your house. Take a block of time and take a walk and receive everything that comes to you in that block of time you've chosen as a gift. Just receive as a gift. The sight of the sky, the feel of your foot on the ground, the crack in the sidewalk, a girl walking her dog, the call of a crow. Walk slowly. Use all your senses. Everything that you see, hear, and smell and touch is a gift. And just practice receiving the world as gift. And here's something I want to suggest that you do. In order to create connection with all of the interconnected parts of this world, direct your gratitude not just to God, you get there, direct it straight to the ones who share their gifts to you. So you see the sunflower and you direct your gratitude to the sunflower and create relationship with it. And you trace any connections you might notice, like giving thanks for those connections. Thank you to the gardener who planted this sunflower, who I will never know who that person was. Thank you for the birds who come and will feast on these sunflower seeds. So just trace any connections. And finally, then open your heart to the always creating one who weaves all of this creation into a single interdependent whole. And when you're done, next slide, I would like you to come home or come back and really consider this question. What does gratitude actually feel like? The more I started working with this process, the more I realized gratitude isn't this nice little feeling that sometimes I've associated with it. It's something a lot deeper and richer. And next week, I really want to hear from you what you're learning about what gratitude really feels like so we can recognize it. And second, gratitude always elicits our immersion back into this web of giving and receiving. What is my gift to give back in response to having received so many gifts in my life? There's a couple more quotes here that I'm not going to take the time right now to do them, but they will be there for your pondering on the PDF of these 4 slides that Rod will be sending out after today. And I really look forward to hearing your experiences, your encounter, and what you're learning, because this is a spiritual practice all of us need to cultivate. So, thank you.
So we only have about 5 minutes left, and there's not time to deal with questions and answers or discussion. I want to bring to your attention a few ideas that were placed in the chats. Andrew asks, since we have more money than ever before in general, and we are not consuming, what should we be doing with that money? What is your answer to that question? We won't talk about it now, but what is your answer to that? Somebody put an answer in the chat about there being a lot of needs in the world, including education and health, and the idea of possibly putting our money toward those things and service, helping people become part of the solution rather than the problem. There were positive references to the comment of Earth Mother. It speaks to at least one person. Does it speak to you? There was an affirmation of some of the things you can learn from living off the grid. There's an affirmation about the 1960s lifestyle and a question. Remember the single bathroom? Could you cope with a single bathroom? I just want to point out that in Christy's video, she said they bought a house with a single bedroom. That was a mistake. She meant a single bathroom for 5 people. They actually have 3 bedrooms, but only 1 bathroom. So they are coping that way. I would like to share with you, if Rod will bring it up, the upcoming events and one more very quick video clip. Next Sunday, we will be having the conversation that goes along with this. And as part of that discussion, we'll explore the possibility of establishing networking groups for climate action. Bring your ideas. Feel free to send your name if you're wanting to participate, and any ideas in an email to any member of the team that you wish, and we'll start collecting those. That will be only part of the discussion. We will talk about what your experiences are, what you have been doing. How do you deal with consumerism? October's climate webinar with Randy Litzenberger is Climate Policies 101. How do we deal with this morass of legislation that we read about and have no clue how to find our way through? He is the co-chair of the 34th District Environment, Energy, and Land Use Caucus for Seattle, and has taught climate policies for years. And then we'll have a conversation on that later on in October. One more thing, if your congregation is addressing climate change, create a video of what you're doing to send to Rod Downing. And there is his email address. And we will begin collecting those, and we'll show some of those in November when we are dealing with very specific items that we can do to make a difference. What is your congregation doing? Send us your videos. All right. Our last video for today is by Brody Sargent, and his is a longer. This is only a very brief clip. We're going to show you the end of it. We will either put that on our website. Well, we definitely put it on the website. We may use the whole clip
Well,
next
people my age
Sunday.
are really scared. You know, I mean, we're kind of seeing already where I'm getting
we don't have a
used to,
visual.
where I'm looking like it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a cool day. It's only 92, and I know from a few years ago, from my childhood, that that isn't normal. Well, people my age are really scared. You know, I mean, we're kind of seeing already where I'm getting used to, where I'm looking like it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be a cool day. It's only 92, and I know from a few years ago, from my childhood, that that isn't normal. But I feel like that is what I'm getting used to for my future, or oh, this is going to be the month of the year that there's smog hovering in the sky from wildfires. So we're really scared. My friends and I really talk about stuff. We talk about energy policy a lot. I think what we're kind of talking about right now, you and me, is we're talking about degrowth. And degrowth is important. It's important that you buy less. It's important that you do less, but degrowth is not really gonna solve climate change alone without a change to energy as well, because China is growing, India is growing, and they want the same kind of quality of life they have. And frankly, I don't think it's right for us to try to keep it from them. But we need to say, especially with things like how do you heat your home, how do you power a grid, how do you electrify a car for people who need cars? All those things are going to require that a government aggressively pursue getting us off of coal and getting us off of natural gas and moving towards nuclear, solar, and wind-powered energy, and hydropower for those of us who are regionally fortunate enough to have hydropower. So really, it's not the little things you can do for yourself are important and are good moral choices, but they need to be paired with a reaching out to our elected officials and saying, we need a different energy regime because we don't want to go back to the medieval ages. We don't want to force other people back into the medieval ages, but we need to be able to live the kind of life we live now a little more responsibly, of course, with a different way of energy. And I think a lot of that is going to come from moving away from an individualist model and moving into, this is a collective problem. We are not going to solve this on our own. We can help, but we need to work together, and we need real leadership. We need leaders who care.
You're muted, Susan.
Brody and his friends are not alone in feeling scared about the future, but we have resources of faith and the courage to act, and we can make a difference in our world. In March of 2007, President Steve Veazey shared with the church an inspired message that directly warned against the effects of unbridled consumerism and human greed. We close this webinar with that reminder written almost 15 years ago. As a prophetic warning, we still struggle to heed and implement. I encourage you to listen with your heart. Make these words live in your own lives. Act with courage to make a difference that shatters our human illusion of independence and unrestricted consumption of resources. From Doctrine and Covenants 163, 4b. The earth, lovingly created as an environment for life to flourish, shudders in distress because creation's natural and living systems are becoming exhausted from carrying the burden of human greed and conflict. Humankind must awaken from its illusion of independence and unrestricted consumption without lasting consequences. Don't forget your homework. Think about the things you've heard. Come prepared to share your experiences, ideas next week, and go with God. Amen.